That means authors are earning roughly between $18,000 and $180,000 on a New York Times bestseller. Keep in mind now, these are being split with the publishing houses. If you write a book and you get accepted and you get paid by Penguin Random House, you have a 96% chance of selling less than 1,000 copies.
Yeah.
Okay, Ilhan Omar from the squad.
Yeah.
She has a significant social media presence with 3 million Twitter followers and another 1.3 million on Instagram, yet her book has sold only 26,000 copies. Piers Morgan,
Okay.
8 million on followers on Twitter. In the US, it sold just 5,650 copies. How are these big publishing houses staying in business? And it is Bibles, celebrity books like Britney Spears books, and their backlist. It is not on things that are intellectually enriching the population. These two market categories, celebrity books and repeated bestsellers from the backlist, make up the entirety of the publishing industry and even fund their vanity project, publishing all the rest of the books we think about when we think about book publishing. That is basically a vanity project. How do they approach people? What they are thinking about when they go out and approach people is, how can I turn their pre-existing follower base into money?
Yeah, they're looking for a platform. They only care about your platform. And
That's
I think they're
all they
starting to
care about.
realize, though, that even the platform doesn't sell. This conversation is really relevant to people who are thinking about writing a book.
Would you like to know more?
Hello, Simone. We are going to do a stats-heavy episode today, which I am excited about, and I hope I ordered these stats well to make a narrative. But it is on reading in America, the state of reading, and what the publishing industry is turning into, and how it's transforming the way books are being published, the type of books that are being published, and the type of books that are being read. So first, I'm going to do a lot of quoting here in this episode. This is from Pew. Almost a third of Americans don't read books at all. And according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics, the ones that do spend only 16 minutes per day reading. Compare that to the average Netflix watcher who spends close to 3 hours per day consuming video content. At that pace, a watcher might get through 681 movies in a year, while a reader gets through only 16 books. And that's presuming that those 15 minutes are spent reading books. Keep in mind, it was just reading. So that could be newspaper, that could be online content, and goodness knows I'd fudge those numbers. Even this year, when leisure time increased as a result of the pandemic, novels saw only a subtle increase in sales over last year by 2.8%. News consumption, however, saw an increase of 215%. Most of that time taking place on Facebook, 23 minutes per day, Google, 14 minutes per day, and MSN, 5 minutes per day. So when people say news consumption, they mean Facebook and Google. So this is highly targeted news, not even just like I'm picking a conservative versus progressive news show to be my bubble of information I'm getting. It's the news stories that are specifically tailored to my interests. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about how few authors are actually writing the books that people are reading. So they had created a list of the top selling books in the US. And of the 2,468 fiction books that made the list, they were written by only 854 authors. It's worth mentioning that 51 of those books were written by James Peterson, 31 were written by Clive Cussler, and 25 were written by Daniel Steele. A huge chunk is written by very few people.
And we've seen this in other stats in terms of how much authors sell, like a very, very small number of books ultimately.
Oh, we're about to get into that.
Okay. This is bad. This is bad.
According to the EPJ data, 96% of fiction book sales take place in the first year, and the majority of the New York Times best-selling books sell between 10,000 and 100,000 copies in their first year. Presuming the average royalty check is 12% and the average hardcover fiction book retails at $15, that means authors are earning roughly between $18,000 and $180,000 on a bestseller. This is a New York Times bestseller. $18,000 to $180,000.
So also, writers are not being paid anything, so why would they bother?
Keep in mind now, these are being split with the publishing houses, and this is only for New York Times bestselling authors. As a New York Times bestselling author, you might be earning $18,000 off of that book.
Wow. You're way better paid being a public school teacher. People argue that like teachers are not paid anything. And
Well,
yet,
and you're splitting that with the publishers.
yeah, when you're like a best-selling author, it's so funny. I remember the first time I met someone who completely didn't understand how much people actually made. And he was telling someone who's probably making less than he was. He's, oh, wow, like I bet you have a yacht or something. And he just had no idea that people in the writing world don't make money.
Yeah. When it's also true with our books, people are always like, why don't you publish more books and stuff like that? You guys must be, why don't you use some of like your books money? Like you guys topped the Wall Street Journal
Our book
nonfiction
money.
bestseller list. And I was like, yeah, we did top the Wall Street Journal nonfiction bestseller list. And they're like, what did you do? But one of my favorite things is they go, what did you do different with that book? Just do that again. And I was like, that was our least selling book by like 1/4 of the sales of our
Yes,
next
just make
least selling book.
money again.
No, and they're like, why did your least selling book top the Wall Street Journal nonfiction bestseller list, but none of your others did? And the answer is simple. All of our other books were Amazon exclusives, which do not qualify for that list or the New York Times bestseller list. The way we got on the list was intentionally hampering the launch of one of our books, putting it in Barnes & Noble when we typically would only list in Amazon. And as a result, we cannot give the book on Kindle Unlimited like we can all our other books. But we were able to technically be Wall Street Journal bestsellers.
With lower reach. With lower reach.
So
Yeah.
we hampered our reach, but we got the title that I had wanted. I wanted to be a bestseller for my whole life. We don't qualify for New York Times. A lot of people don't know this. So to be a New York Times bestseller until fairly recently, and now they break the rules only for like progressive aligned books, but you have to be published by a New York Times based publishing house. It's not any book. If you self-publish, you cannot get on that list. And if you're not self-publishing, you're splitting your money with somebody else for basically nothing. Keep in mind that $18,000 that they're making is being split with a publisher, or max around $180,000 for a normal New York Times bestseller. That's being split with a publisher who's taking about half.
Yeah, no
So
good.
you're making like $90,000 per New York Times bestseller book. And most of your books aren't going to be that, but let's keep going here so we can get the idea of what are the actual numbers involved in sales here.
Yeah.
So there's a chart I'm going to put on screen here, which shows the copies sold in 1 year. Number of print titles that sell over 1 million is 0. Number of digital titles that sell over 1 million is 1. And number of audiobooks is 0.
Wow.
100,000 to 1 million. Number of print titles, 8. Number of digital titles, 10. And number of audiobooks, 6. 100,000 to 500,000. Print titles, 260. Number of digital titles, 267. And number of audiobooks, 111. And something you'll start to notice from this point in the chart on that's really interesting is the number of print books and digital titles that make it into each of these categories is about equal. So what if you get this explosion in the digital world, but it's really not that much above the print world, where you get that one book that's over 1 million. 10,000 to 100,000, print 6.5 thousand, digital 7,000, audio 2,000. And then 1,000 to 10,000, print 57, digital 75,000, audiobooks 17,000.
So we're doing actually pretty good in terms of our book sales when you think about it.
Our book sales, we typically do about 50,000 per book or something like that was a lot of our books. I think we might be over that now. I haven't checked in a few years.
What you're also not, you haven't yet pointed out at least, is that the majority of these books that are selling are probably romance novels or like really smutty, not sometimes smutty, teen fiction and stuff. When you look at what's actually selling.
Yeah, a lot of the books that actually sell are romance novels or like
Most.
really smutty.
When you
they're
talk
girl
with
porn.
authors who actually make money, they're romance novel writers. So
yeah. So I'm going to keep going with more stats here, and we can talk more about the industry and what's happening. But I want to give people an idea of how little people are actually reading as we go into this. So in 2022, Penguin Random House wanted to buy Simon & Schuster. The two publishing houses, these are coming from like a ton of different articles. If you want to find them, just Google the words I'm saying. I just tried to pull together the most interesting quotes from a bunch of articles on this. The two publishing houses made up 37% and 11% of the marketing share, according to the filing. And combined, they would have condensed the big five publishing houses into the big four. But the government intervened and brought an antitrust case against Penguin to determine whether that would create a monopoly. During the trial, the head of every major publishing house and literary agency group got on stand to speak about the publishing industry and give numbers, giving us an eye-opening account from the inside. The big five publishing houses spent most of their money on book advances for big celebrities like Britney Spears and franchise authors like James Patterson. And this is the bulk of their business. They also sell a lot of Bibles, repeat bestsellers like Lord of the Rings, and children's books like The Very Hungry Caterpillar. These two market categories, celebrity books and repeated bestsellers from the backlist, make up the entirety of the publishing industry and even fund their vanity project, publishing all the rest of the books we think about when we think about book publishing. That is basically a vanity project.
And that so checks out. We have multiple copies of The Very Hungry Caterpillar in our house. I tripped over one this morning. They're just everywhere.
And then it goes on to say, which make no money at all and typically sell less than 1,000 copies. I want to keep that in mind. The entire, what you think of as like the literary industry, if you're like, if they're only making 180,000 to 20,000 a year on New York Times bestsellers, how are these big publishing houses staying in business? And it is Bibles, celebrity books like Britney Spears books, and their backlist. It is not on things that are intellectually enriching the population.
Which is wild, because when you look at old libraries, when you look at people read it in the past, it was a different story. The market hadn't discovered yet that you could publish gossip and romance and whatnot in books. But it's crazy to think of what the old library used to look like. And now people buy books just for signaling. There are lots of people like YouTubers, people with their Zoom backgrounds with all these substantive books. I feel like maybe now 50% or more of the substantive, nice hardcover books that are being bought literally as Zoom background or YouTube background dressing, nothing more.
I wouldn't be surprised about that at all. Yeah. And I would also just promote books for a second here, or even audiobooks. Like, you could be listening to a podcast like the one that you're listening to with us. I'm not trying to lower our listener base here, but I'm just telling it like it is. Or you could be listening to an audiobook, right? If you are listening to this podcast versus one of our audiobooks, everything on this podcast is off the top of our heads, okay? Generally speaking. Occasionally I'll do a pre-written thing, but those are usually our worst performing videos. Every single line in our audiobook was counter-checked by each of us maybe 100 times.
Yeah. And there's still typos. There are still typos. Yeah, and every people copy edited them. Yeah. And what happens when we write books, Malcolm writes them. I completely rewrite every sentence to make it more like palatable. Yeah. Then he completely rewrites them because he's like, completely don't understand anything. And then I completely rewrite them again because I'm like, no, this is not clear at all. And then somewhere in there it stops, maybe 2 more rounds later. That is so much more work. The number of hours that goes into each book. People recently have been contacting Malcolm and saying, oh, it's sad that you're not going to write books as much as you did before. But when we look at the reach,
I'm like, but people watch my YouTube channel. They don't read the books that much.
Yeah. And a lot of people, and this podcast is really relevant to what we're discussing now. That is to say, this conversation is really relevant to people who are thinking about writing a book. One of the early podcasts that Spencer Greenberg did on Clearer Thinking with Spencer Greenberg, his podcast, was interviewing someone who really had this strong theory that we have passed an age at which books made sense. And if you want to actually reach someone with a message, as much as it seems wrong, because it doesn't seem as intellectual, it doesn't seem as prestigious, you really should be engaging with people on different formats. But I think the question is, on what format should you be engaging with people? Because, for example, if you're engaging with people on Twitter, we found Twitter doesn't really convert. Twitter doesn't really change minds. We found that YouTube does change minds, and we do think it's really meaningful. And we found that podcasts are the same. So you have to be thoughtful about where you are, but books should not be on.
Yeah. And before I go further with the stats, I think you make a good point there. Like, we could get broader reach potentially by trying to do something like TikTok or Instagram shorts, but we're not reaching people in the right mental space to engage them. I don't care about being famous. I care about changing minds. That's the point of all of this, to helping people think deeper, think more, and understand their world better. Everything, like, it wouldn't matter if I was just in front of a bunch of people. Like, that's not interesting to me. And so YouTube seems to be the perfect medium for this. But you have to do the type of content we're doing on YouTube. You have to have a really heavy upload schedule, which we have, but it prevents super scripted stuff from us.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless we were to start a different channel for it, but I don't even know if that's something I want to engage in. But okay, to go further with the quotes here, because this is actually really interesting stuff. Okay, so Madeleine McIntosh, CEO of Penguin Random House US in 2020, only 268 titles sold more than 100,000 copies, and 96% of all the books they publish sold less than 1,000 copies. That's still the vibe. Oh, you're so sweet to the little one. Simone, just so you register that, I want to run that by you again. Of Penguin Random House, okay? Of all of the books they sold, only 268 sold more than 100,000 copies. With 96%. So if you write a book and you get accepted and you get paid by Penguin Random House, you have a 96% chance of selling less than 1,000 copies. Like when we talk about
That's worse than venture capital, isn't it?
Yeah, when we talk about how small these numbers are, so if you want to contrast that with, suppose, some of our videos, right? Okay, so yesterday we had a video that already today that went live is at 8,000 views, over 8,000 views. The day before that, we have a video that's now at 22,000 views. So those are some of our better performing videos, but that's daily we are producing something that is getting more purchases or watches than a book. So we can look at the one that went live today that is not like it's a particularly poor performing episode because I put effort into it, the Levels of Thinking episode. So that's at 8 of 10 of our last 10 episodes we've released. So it's near the bottom of our episodes, but it's already just today at 1.5 thousand views. And people should be like, oh, that's just a number of people who clicked on it. They're not necessarily watching it a long time. The average person viewing that episode is watching for 17 and a half minutes. So that's pretty deep watching. That's not just, if you're going to reach people with intellectual content, this is just not the way to do it, books anymore. And then here's an interview with her. Question, do you know approximately how many authors there are across the industry with 500,000 units or more during this 4-year period? My understanding is that it was about 50. And I should point out here that we are small-time YouTubers, We're like 12,000 subscribers or something like that, right? That we are out 96% of authors who go through multiple rounds of editing, get accepted by a major publishing house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is insane. Question, 50 authors across the publishing industry who during this 4-year period sold more than 500,000 units in a single year? Yes, they were incredulous. The DOJ's lawyer collected data on 58,000 titles published in a year and discovered that 90% of them sold fewer than 2,000 copies and 50% sold less than a dozen copies.
Ouch.
So 90%.
Oh, God.
Okay, so next. 75% of our acquisitions come from approaching celebrities, politicians, athletes, the quote unquote celebrity adjacent, etc. That way we can control the content. We are approaching authors and celebrities and politicians and athletes for ideas. So it's really, we are on the lookout. We are scouts in a lot of ways. Jennifer Bergstrom, SVP, Gallery Books Group. Top selling authors were defined as those receiving advances, i.e. guaranteed money, in excess of $250,000. Far fewer than 1% of authors receive advances over that mark. Publishers Marketplace, which tracks these things, recorded 233 such deals in all of 2020. So I'm gonna go over some of these categories, and then we're going to talk about what this does to readers and what this does to the publishing industry more broadly. Category 1 led to titles with a sales goal of 75,000 units and up. An advance for something of that is around 500,000. Titles with a sale goal of 25,000 to 75,000 units get an advance of 150,000 to $1 million. Titles with a sales goal of 10,000 to 25,000 units get an advance of actually $50,000 to $150,000. It's much more than you'd expect, given how little these are making. Where you can really see what they mean by this is a pet project. Titles with a sales goal of 5,000 to 10,000 units. So imagine one of our episodes had 5,000 watches. We would consider that like nothing, right? This is the goal for them. They're getting an advance of $50,000. They said 50,000 or less, but that's still pretty good.
Yeah, it is.
It's,
Wow.
and I love the author here is anyone else alarmed that the top tier of book sales projections is only 75,000 units and up? Like one post on Substacks gets more views than that.
Yeah, I think, but what you need to look at this as is the number of people willing to put down money to consume someone's ideas. So it's investing both money and time. So really what you should be looking at is paid Substack subscribers as an equivalent, or paid Patreon followers, or paid YouTube subscribers, or people who leave super thanks on YouTube. Because there is a difference with books. People are putting down money in addition to time. With streaming and podcasts and Twitter, whatever you might have there, it's people only investing time. So
well,
I would give a little bit of a premium to publishing, but it's still a
well,
lot less.
and here you're going to hear the sad news. There are plenty of books that we spent. So this is coming from Madeline McIntosh, the CEO of Penguin Random House. There are plenty of books that we spend 1 million on the advance and published them last year, and they did not even make it into the top 1,000 books on BookScan. Less than 45% of those books, the books we spend $1 million on, end up in the 1,000 bestseller list.
Oh.
So less than half of the books they're giving these $1 million advances to are even making it into the top 1,000 best-selling books. And to be clear, we have regularly made it into the top 1,000 best-selling books. It is not hard to get into that. To get into the top 1,000 best-selling books, you need to sell like 10,000 copies, I think, or something around there. It's really not that hard. 5,000 copies, I think, on a launch month.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. According to Hill, 85% of the books with advances of $250,000 and up never earn out their advance. 85% aren't earning out their advance. The entire royalties made by the book. So they're never getting any royalties, anything like that, those authors. Even celebrities, so sometimes you think it's going to be a big bestseller, flops. Andrew Cuomo's book was sold at the height of his being America's governor during COVID crisis.
Cuomo.
That book was sold for $5 million, I believe. I don't know for a fact, but at the time it came out, the nursing home scandal had happened, the Me Too issues, and the book didn't do any business.
Ouch.
Sometimes it's just a timing issue. Like Marie Kondo, she did a book about joy at work and making your office sparked with joy because it's not cluttered. It published March of 2020. That was a literary agent talking about that. Having a lot of social media followers and fame doesn't guarantee it will sell well. The singer Billie Eilish, despite her 97 million Instagram followers and 6 million Twitter followers, only sold 64,000 copies within 8 months of publishing her book.
Billie Eilish only managed to sell 64,000 copies. She has more fans than that.
Right?
Damn.
The singer Justin Timberlake sold only 100,000 copies of his book in 3 years after he published it.
I guess the problem is that these people also did not have salacious books. So I haven't read many biographies, but I do follow YouTubers who read the biographies and summarize them for me. And the only reason why they bother is because there's a lot of hot goss in those books. And it seems like perhaps these people didn't have that. But even that, see, that's the thing, is my whole point is also you have to keep in mind the number of books being sold are mostly gossip, romance, totally not substantive. And the problem here is that even the non-substantive stuff that publishers are like, at least this one will make us money, it doesn't always make them money. Oh, it's so sad. It's so sad.
Hold on. We've got more here. This one I think is going to surprise you. Snoop Dogg's cookbook saw a boost during the pandemic, but he still only sold 205,000 copies.
That makes sense. This whole Snoop Dogg Martha Stewart thing, as much as I love it, is very forced. There's no audience for that.
Okay, you want to hear another one that'll probably make you happy to hear? Okay, Representative Ilhan Omar, a Democrat from Minnesota. Ilhan Omar from the Squad.
Yeah, whose daughter protested at Columbia and then became homeless and destitute because she was kicked out of Barnard.
Okay, so she's no global pop star, but she has a significant social media presence with 3 million Twitter followers. How many of those are Democrat bots? But follow... And another 1.3 million on Instagram. Yet her book, This Is What America Looks Like, My Journey from Refugee to Congresswoman, which was published in 2022, has sold only, can you guess?
I don't know, 12,000 copies.
26,000 copies.
No one wants to hear that though. Like you hear that title and you're like, I get it. You can even be a fan of hers, but you don't want to, I don't want to relive that. That doesn't sound fun. I don't even want to live that vicariously for the first time. Like, why bring this up? This is ridiculous.
Okay, here I've got 2 more that are good ones. Okay, so Tamika D. Mallory, a social activist with over 1 million Instagram followers and who was paid $1 million for a 2-book deal. Her first book, State of Emergency, sold only 26,000 copies. Here's one that kind of bums me out. Piers Morgan,
Okay.
8 million on followers on Twitter. He's interviewed us before on Instagram. He has 1.8 million followers, and he wrote the book Wake Up: Why the World Has Gone Nuts. In the US, it sold just 5,650 copies. 5,000 for Piers Morgan's book.
No one knows him here. Perhaps that's the issue. But I hear it. No one reads. No one reads. Also, Gen Alpha doesn't know how to read. There's that as well.
So this is where I want to tie this all up with sort of our message to young authors and stuff like that when you're reading all of this. There is no reason to go through a traditional publisher anymore.
Yeah.
You are getting nothing. Their game
Worse. So what you talked about here is a lot of authors have not made it past their point at which they can start making royalties, right? They've not made past that point where at least the publishers have a slight profit or net neutral. We know many authors who in their contracts were then obligated to sell a certain number of books. And if they failed to sell them, guess what was in the fine print of that contract? You got to buy them. So we know all these people who are like, yeah, I have a garage full of books. Would you like one? Yeah. Because I want my garage back because I had to buy a gazillion books because it was in my contract and I didn't manage to sell the number that I was obligated to sell. So not only are you probably not getting any money, any actual readership, you might also be like completely in a financial hole. I don't think we've made.
What are you thinking? If you're in the publishing industry right now, how do they approach the industry? How do they approach people? What they are thinking about when they go out and approach people is, how can I turn their pre-existing follower base into money? That's what they're attempting to do. They are not attempting to turn nobodies into famous authors.
They're looking for a platform. They only care about your platform. And I think they're starting to realize, though, that even the platform doesn't sell. So what do they do? If you are
an author without a platform, there is no reason for them to work with you or really give you any money. And then you can go out and sell by yourself. But then, like, why not just keep all the money? Like, you really gain so little by going through the traditional publishing houses. And as repeated best-selling authors, I can just go through what you're getting from them. A chance at a New York Times bestseller slot if you are the right politics.
If they're a New York publisher.
If they're a New York publisher. Okay. So that's one. The second thing you get is some credibility among idiots.
Prestigious.
But most people don't really care. The other thing that you get is not really help with marketing. They don't really do that anymore. So you're not really getting that. You might get
like the editorial oversight, some don't.
But really, they're like, you get editors. It's like, no, you lose control of editing. You lose control of the title of your book.
Some like that, some don't. Some like that, some don't. We have to say that. Some people just want to be told what to do.
And you may get an advance. If you don't expect your book to do well, 100% go for that advance. As long as you can get out of the fine print that Simone's talking about. What do you lose? You lose pricing control, which is literally everything in today's market.
Yes.
All of our books retail for 99 cents for the digital book because we know we're not going to make money from them and we just want people to get them. And we give away our audiobooks for free if you get the digital book. You can also get them on Audible if you find it easier to use that platform because it's easier than using just MP3 files for some people if they have a lot of money. But we don't try to make any money off of our books. Some people are like, oh, I got your book as a favor to you. And I'm like, then put it somewhere prominent in your house. That's how you do me a favor.
All the profits go directly to our nonprofit bank account. So it does help the nonprofit. Moderately.
But we're making like 50 cents per book because I put it at like the lowest level that we can price it at.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that you're losing, which then makes it so you have less reach with your books. But if I wanted to go for more, then I'd be making higher margins. But then you also have total control of how it's released, where it's released, etc. And then for audiobooks, just read your own book. Like initially we hired like audiobook people and I was like, why am I doing this? I just read my own book. And that's the way we do our books now. But I think what this means is a lot of people, they see books as a refuge of like academics or intellectualism. But it isn't that anymore. I think the true intellectuals now are Substack. I think that's the most intellectual reading and high ideas engagement platform at the moment.
Yes.
And then after Substack, I think it's blogs, like you go to Aporia or something like that. And then after that, I think it's YouTube. And then after YouTube, I don't really think anything is even in the game
Well,
to be.
podcasts, come on.
Oh
Are
yeah,
you lumping
podcasts.
them together?
Yeah. And I guess this
Podcasts
is
are
technically a
fantastic.
podcast. Some people are watching this through podcasts. One of my favorites is like, oh, I watch our YouTube videos and I put them through AI so I can turn it into written text so I can read that and consume it faster. And I was like, we have a Substack that automatically does that, right? I pre-translate all of these to written text, so that's the way you prefer to consume them. Like my job is just, or my goal is just to touch as many people as possible. That's the goal with these ideas and these platforms. And that's how you do it these days. You need to adapt to your environment. And I think a lot of people, they'll say things like, yeah, but the podcasts and the YouTubes, those won't be seen as classics in 100 years. And I'm like, yeah, of course they will. And they're like, podcasts from 100 years ago aren't seen as classics. I'm like, podcasts for 100 years ago were things like the Federalist Papers. That was two people arguing against each other in like the op-ed section of a magazine. That was the podcast of its period. Or like St. Paul's Letters or something like that. Not everything was done in book format. And
Yeah.
even like this panic about people, like young people over watching podcasts and it dumbing them down. I think you see this in the early days of books. People were afraid of reading fever. If like young girls getting reading fever, they would just do nothing but read, it was said, and it was rotting their brains.
Uh-oh.
And because they believed that books were addictive and messed with the brains of young women, if that sounds familiar to you. But anyway, I have loved this conversation, and I'm glad that we were able to bring this topic to our audience.
Likewise. TLDR, don't write a book. Make a podcast or Substack.
And I love you to death, Simone.
Love you too, Corja.
You are amazing.
So
and if
are
you do want to check out our books, it's the Pragmatist Guide series, and we have one on religion, sexuality, relationships, life,
and governance
theory.
Mm-hmm.